Death, that little subject that we all know will come sooner or later, but that no one likes to talk about too much. However, in many cultures, death was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new adventure in the afterlife. But what happens when you die? It depends a lot on which mythology you ask, because each one has its own version of what happens when you take your last breath. Today, we're going to take a walk through the beliefs of the afterlife in various mythologies around the world. Be sure to bring your passport, because gods, spirits, and some pretty curious places await us. Let's start with Japan, a place where death has several interesting nuances. According to Shinto, the traditional Japanese religion, when you die, your soul travels to a place called the Yomi, a sort of underworld that we could describe as the Japanese equivalent of Hades. It's not exactly a paradise, but neither is it a place of punishment like hell in other mythologies. It's more like a gray limbo where souls wander eternally without much to do. Mind you, not all souls stay there. In Japan, there is a strong belief in ghosts, known as yurei, who are souls that fail to find rest. Sometimes these yurei are so angry or filled with a grudge that they decide to return to the world of the living to settle scores. Does the idea of a girl with long, dark hair chasing you ring a bell? Well, those vengeful spirits come from these beliefs. So if you die in Japan, you'd better not leave unfinished business. We go now to West Africa, to Yoruba mythology, where death is more like a passage to another world called Orun. In this mythology, souls pass from one life to another in a continuous cycle. The Orun is not a place of punishment or reward, but rather a space where souls rest before reincarnating or ascending to higher levels, depending on how you have lived your life. Here it is not so much about rewards or punishments after death, but more about spiritual evolution. If you did things right, your soul can advance to a higher level in the Orun, while if not, well, you will have to continue in the cycle of reincarnations until you learn the missing lessons. So, basically, dying in Yoruba culture is like moving on to the next phase of a video game, but a spiritual one. If we travel back to pre-Hispanic Mexico, the Aztecs had a pretty harsh view of death. When you died, you didn't go straight to paradise or hell. No, sir. The first thing that awaited you was a journey through 9 levels of the underworld, collectively known as Mictlán. And believe me, this journey was no walk in the park. You would have to cross rivers, mountains, and face dangerous beasts. All this to reach Mictlantecutli, the Lord of the Dead. The type of death you died also determined where you went. For example, if you died in battle or during childbirth, you went to a special place where you became a warrior or companion of the sun. But if you died of old age or natural causes, get ready for your long journey to the Mictlán. It's not a pleasant place, but at least once you got through it, your soul could rest in peace. From the Aztecs, we moved on to their neighbors, the Maya, who also had their own underworld called Xibalbá. This place was full of traps, trials, and dangers. Xibalbá was ruled by demonic lords who delighted in making the souls who arrived there suffer. If your life had been good, you could find a way to ascend to a better place, but if not, you were trapped in this dark underworld. Here, the trials of the underworld were very important, and many times you depended on your ability to overcome them in order to advance. So if you were very skilled in life, you probably did better in Xibalbá. Otherwise, well, let's just say you'd have a few problems. Now we move to one of the best-known mythologies, the Greek. When the ancient Greeks died, their souls were taken to Hades, the underworld, ruled by the god Hades. To get there, you had to cross the river Styx in a boat driven by Charon, the ferryman of the dead. But beware, he didn't take you for free. To get on his boat, you needed a coin, which was usually placed in the mouth of the dead before burial. Once in Hades, most souls went to a sort of eternal shadow where they spent eternity wandering. However, if you had been a hero or had lived an exceptional life, you could end up in the Elysian fields, a kind of paradise for the great ones. And if you had been evil, well, you might end up in Tartarus, a place of eternal torment and suffering. So, in short, Greek mythology gave you several options for your post-mortem life, but most people ended up in a rather dull existence in the shadows. The Romans, as was customary, took many ideas from the Greeks. Their view of death was quite similar, with an underworld ruled by the god Pluto. Here, too, you needed to cross a river, and if you did well, you could end up in the Elysian fields. However, the Romans put a more bureaucratic spin on the whole thing. The fate of your soul depended on a judgment where your deeds in life were analyzed. If you had been good, you went to a place of rest. If not, you could end up in a place of punishment. Something interesting in Roman mythology is the idea of the manes, the spirits of the dead who were revered by families. It was believed that the spirits of ancestors continued to watch over the living, so Romans made offerings to honor them and keep them happy in the afterlife. In other words, take good care of your grandparents. We move to India, where death is not an end, but only a transition. According to Hindu mythology, souls are trapped in a continuous cycle of life, death, and reincarnation, known as Samsara. Your fate in the next life depends on your karma, that is, the actions you have performed in this life. If you have accumulated good karma, you may reincarnate in a better life. If not, you could return in a lower form, such as an animal or a person in difficult situations. The ultimate goal is to be liberated from samsara and attain moksha, which is liberation from the cycle of reincarnations and union with the whole. So, instead of a heaven or hell, what matters here is how you live your life and the consequences your actions have on the next ones. Now we head to the cold north with the Vikings and their Norse mythology. Here, death in battle had a very special reward. If you died with honor on the battlefield, you were taken to Valhalla, the hall of heroes ruled by Odin. In Valhalla, warriors spent their days fighting and their nights celebrating with great banquets. It was a kind of paradise for warriors, but not everyone went to Valhalla. If you died a more normal death, your destination was Helheim, ruled by the goddess Hel. Helheim was not a place of punishment, but neither was it a place where great things happened. The souls simply lived a quiet existence, but without the glamour of Valhalla. For the ancient Celts, death was a simple passage to the otherworld, a place where souls continued to exist in a kind of paradise. It was not a place of judgment or punishment, rather a place where souls could rest and enjoy themselves. Here, there was not so much a focus on the morality of acts during life, but on the idea that death is a natural transition to another state of existence. In Inca mythology, the fate of your soul depended on how you had lived. If you had been a good person, you went to the Hanan Pacha, a heavenly place where souls could rest in peace. But if you had been evil, your soul went to Pacha, the underworld. Here, the idea was that souls received a destiny according to their actions in life, but there was also a belief in the constant connection between the living and the dead. In Slavic mythology, death was not the end. It was the beginning of a journey to the Nav, the realm of the dead. Here, souls were guided by gods such as Veles, the god of the dead and magic. The Nav was a mysterious place where souls were reunited with their ancestors. But it was not a place of punishment or reward. Rather, it was a space where spirits continued to protect their living descendants. As in other cultures, the Slavs had a strong connection to their ancestors. They believed that the souls of the dead could influence the lives of the living, helping or protecting them. So offerings and rituals were common to honor them. If you died in Slavic mythology, you were not going to suffer eternal punishment or battle in a celestial hall, but simply join a spiritual network of family support. Now let's delve into one of the most fascinating cultures when it comes to the afterlife, the Egyptians. For the ancient Egyptians, death was only the beginning of a long journey to eternal life. After death, your soul was brought before the god Osiris, the lord of the underworld, to undergo a very specific judgment. Your heart would be placed on a scale, and the god Anubis would weigh your heart against the feather of Mat, the goddess of truth and justice. If your heart was lighter than the feather, congratulations, you would pass to the Aru, the fields of reeds, where you would live eternally in peace and happiness. But if your heart was heavier than the feather, it meant that you had led a life full of evil. In that case, your soul would be devoured by Amit, a creature that was a mixture of crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus, and that was a fate worse than death, as your soul would cease to exist altogether. The idea of eternal life in the fields of Aru was the most an Egyptian could wish for, and that's why they took funeral rituals so seriously. Embalming the body and preparing everything for the journey to the afterlife was a sacred task that ensured a good post-mortem life. Once we have traveled through all these underworlds and paradises, we can see how, despite cultural differences, there is a common theme. Death is not the end, but a transition. Whether you go to Mictlán, become a Yure, reach the Elysian fields, or reincarnate in Samsara, the important thing is how you lived your life. Actions in life are crucial in determining what awaits you in the afterlife, according to most of these beliefs. It is interesting how the view of death reflects the values of each society. For example, the Vikings valued bravery in battle, which is why their paradise is a hall full of warriors, where they fight and feast eternally. The Egyptians, on the other hand, valued balance and truth, which is why the judgment of Osiris revolves around the purity of your heart. In India, karma and reincarnation reflect a philosophy of life more focused on learning and spiritual evolution. In all of these cultures, death is a crucial part of life, and beliefs about what happens after death give us insight into what these civilizations valued and feared. Moreover, all of these beliefs shaped funeral rituals, monuments, and customs that have endured to this day. After this tour through the different mythologies, we are left with the big question: what really happens when we die? Throughout history, civilizations have tried to answer this question in 1,000 different ways, but the truth is that it is still one of the greatest mysteries of humanity. What we can learn from all these mythologies is that death is something to be faced with respect, and that our life, to a large extent, will determine what happens after we are gone. No matter what your personal beliefs are, what is clear is that humanity has always had a very deep and symbolic relationship with death. Each culture has developed its own answers to make the idea of what comes after our last breath more bearable. Leave me your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know which of these afterlife mythologies you find most fascinating. If you could choose your final destination based on these beliefs, which one would you choose and why? Would you go with the idea of reincarnation, or would you prefer an eternal life in a paradisiacal place? Does a Valhalla full of warriors or a peaceful Elysian fields sound better? I hope to read your answer in the comments. That's all for today. If you liked the video, remember to subscribe. Thank you all for staying until the end, and I hope to see you in next week's video.